Guys, welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh. Boy, do we have a special guest. Second time around on the show, my main man, Tucker Max, is in the house. What's up, Tucker?
What's up? What's up, D?
Oh, man. So for those of you that are new to the show, you're going to learn right now that we're about two things: people who are living their passions and those who are creating greatness in the world. And my friend Tucker is neither short of passion or greatness. So excited to have you here, man. It's been a while, man. I haven't seen you. I don't think we've been online together for probably 18 months or so. How you doing?
It's been a while. Doing great, man. Doing very well.
So normally I give backgrounds on how I know people. So I'll do that for people that have not heard the first show. But we had Tucker on the show right after my book launch. And I did my book launch, Core Value Equation, with my main man Tucker here and his company Scribe, which we'll be talking a little bit about. I know you just did kind of like a partial exit, right? Like you still
basically, yeah.
You're still involved, but you're exited.
Yeah.
And so I was introduced to Tucker through John Ruhlin, author of Giftology, about 3 years ago, almost to the month. And I told Tucker I want to write a book, and we had coffee here in Austin together. And he you were a great source of information, an amazing source of information. But he essentially helped me write my book, and from there we become friends. COVID hit, so there's not been a lot of hanging out, but a lot of online stuff and just kind of chilling and some behind the scenes connectivity that we were talking about offline before the show. But yeah, I can owe my book to Tucker because it wouldn't have happened. It may have happened, but it wouldn't have happened when it happened if it wasn't for you. And I really appreciate that from you, my friend.
Dude, thank you. You did most of the work, man.
Yeah, no, it takes, the work. You got to do the work either way, but getting the guidance, that's a big part of it. It's getting that coaching and that tutoring. And so it was a really big deal for me. It's changed my life in a lot of ways. And so that's how I met Tucker and how we've gotten to know each other. But I'm going to give the formal bio. We probably have a lot of listeners that know you. Some may not, though. But the reason I connected with Tucker and why John referred him is Tucker himself is, and I don't know if, for some people might use the word famous. I'll use the word famous right now. He's famous for the fact that he's written 4 New York Times best-selling books, 3 hit number 1. I read his first book. I hope they serve beer in hell. Probably a decade before I met Tucker. Loved his books. Like I said, you sold over 4.5 million copies worldwide. You're the creator of the literary genre fratire, and he's the only 4th writer, along with Malcolm Gladwell, Brene Brown, and Michael Lewis, to have 3 books on the New York Times nonfiction bestseller list at one time. Nominated for Times Magazine's 100 Most Influential People in 2009. Tucker's helped people like David Goggins, Tiffany Haddish, Dave Sullivan, and others publish their books through Scribina, which we were just talking about. He's the co-founder of that company, just exited it. And you are currently living on a ranch in Dripping Springs with your wife Veronica, and 4 children, man. What a life. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, great, man. Fantastic. Like, it's a lot of work out here, but it's awesome. I love it.
So my wife's family, my wife's aunt got remarried about a decade ago to a rancher in Napa Valley, and he owns a 2,000-acre ranch. And he
owns a 2,000-acre ranch in Napa Valley.
Yeah, it's no joke.
He's not a rancher. That dude either inherited that or he made a buttload of money doing something else. 2,000 acres in Napa is like that's off the charts.
Yeah, he bought it in 1981. His family is very well known in the oil and gas business.
There you go.
And he was a guy that studied wine in the 70s, and he's one of the essentially he's one of the guys that kind of made Napa what it is.
Who? I probably know who he is.
His name's Lee Hudson. He's the guy behind the guy. He's Napa Grape Grower of the Year many times.
Yeah.
His mother, his family, his grandmother has a museum of modern art in Houston named after her, the Blanford Museum of Modern Art.
Oh yeah, of course, I know that one.
Yeah, he's from there's many important names in his family, but yeah. So the reason I brought it up wasn't to brag about my wife's family's heritage, but was actually because I watch him work that land.
Right.
And dude, I mean, for a guy that was born to he can do whatever the heck he wants. he busts his ass. Like he's up early and he's working that ranch and it is, I mean, I stay there all the time and hang out there. And so like that's a big piece of land, and most of it, they're not, they're just kind of maintaining it. But dude, 50 acre, I have 1 acre of land, which is a ton in central Austin. I mean, I can't imagine 50 acres. So yeah, let's back up. So you guys, when did you guys move out to Dripping Spring with this ranch?
October.
Oh, so this just happened like 5 months ago, 6 months ago.
Yeah, we just got here.
And so what was the driving force for you to get into the ranch?
Well, I mean, so my wife and I had always talked about we wanted to get on land and all that kind of stuff. But the real driving force was, I mean, honestly, what has happened in the world and specifically America over the last 2 years, right? Like, I'm convinced that and it's funny. It's like every month things get more chaotic, and I'm convinced we're heading into a phase of history where things are going to get hard in a lot of ways for a lot of people. And whether you're talking about climate change or supply chain issues or pandemics or war, or God forbid, nuclear war, which was off the table seemingly for decades and now weirdly has come back, or some other set or series of things. There's a lot of, we came out of a period that was quite honestly probably the richest, most abundant, safest period, at least in the West, that the world has ever known. And that's over, at least for a while. And so the question really for us became, well, how do we handle that, right? Like once you kind of see it and admit it to yourself, which most people still haven't, which whatever is fine. But the only real thing you can do is decide to really get serious about being sovereign, right? And I mean sovereign in the sense where you are not reliant on other entities for your existence, right? So we live on land that is unincorporated. We have our own, so we own our sources of water. We own, we have redundant sources of energy. So we have some owned sources of energy, solar, etc. And we own our sources of food, right? So like we have fields with cattle and sheep and chickens, and we can grow things. Now, we're not like, a lot of people are like, oh, you're trying to be off-grid preppers, or no, there's no such thing as off-grid. Like if you think you're off-grid, then what do you do when a power coupler breaks for your solar? You realize you're not just on grid, you're tied to China, right? So it's like, to stop with off-grid. It's about being able to be capable of producing everything as much as possible of what you need, either yourself or within your immediate community, right? And so once we really kind of, like woke up over the last 2 years and realized, oh man, like our entire lives are completely dependent upon this supply chain and this edifice that is breaking. At best, it's just breaking. At worst, there could be other things going on, but it's breaking, right? And so it's like, okay, well, we need to go somewhere, and it's not just, you don't just scale out people like, oh, well, if America sucks, go somewhere else. It's like, it's not, I don't think that's how it's going to work. I think it's like, things are going to be difficult everywhere. And so the question is, where are you going to be where you can both be very sovereign, but then also be around other people, be in a community of people who are doing similar things, right? Who are very self-reliant, who are producing their own things, who can produce things that can help you and you can trade and vice versa, right? So that's why we picked Dripping Springs, Texas, which is about an hour outside of Austin. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of like-minded people here. There's for Central Texas, there's got a lot of water. There's a lot of other reasons why we picked this area. But and so that's what we've been doing the last 6 months, is getting the ranch. It was already pretty nice, but really getting it up to speed where, like, God forbid, the world's economic network shuts down for 2 months, right? We'll be fine. Like, we'll be
Yeah.
great. Like, I'm not gonna be excited that I can't, go get other cool things, but like, we're not, we'll have all the water and power and food we need. So
So a lot of people that are like, just like, what are we, 10 minutes in the show, they're like, what the fuck are these guys talking about, right? And
man, at this point, if what I just said is a complete shock to you, I would recommend you look around at the way the world has been the last 2 years. And if you think everything's going fine, probably just go ahead and turn the podcast off, and because you're not going to make it. So just go ahead and make the most out of the next 3 to 6 months or 2 or 3 years. And then, I'll see you guys. Like, if the idea that you need to start preparing for a chaotic world is beyond you, man, you're so far behind the 8 ball. I don't know if you can catch up anymore.
yeah. So what's funny? So what kind of led me? I've been casually following some of the stuff you've been talking about. There's other folks that I listen to and that I trust, like yourself, that have this has popped up on my radar in multiple areas. So the first place that popped up in my radar was about 4 years ago. I was at MIT, and there's someone that came and spoke to us, and they started talking about the book The Fourth Turning
Yeah,
by
of
Howe.
course.
Right. So for those listeners that don't know, this is essentially, it's that the world has these like 80 to 150 year cycles, and that, people die who lived through the hardship. So they don't, like, the next guy was born and didn't, and then they have a kid, and that kid never experienced the hardship. And that we as humans are kind of doomed to repeat ourselves, both like politically and then economically, and then geopolitically, right? So these things all kind of, there's these cycles happen, these macro cycles. Some of it's debt driven, some of it's politically driven, but like what's happening today has already happened before, right? I think the last time one could argue that we were in this type of cycle was probably like 1920s, 1930s, right? That was the end of the last cycle, supposedly. And then I'm a big Ray Dalio fan, and when he started talking, he has his new book, Changing World Order, which is essentially the rise and fall of empires. And he just published it, but he put the PDFs out about a year ago. And I devoured them. I read all of them because I like Ray Dalio's stuff. I like the way he thinks. And a lot of the stuff that he's talking about, he says, there's a 6-stage cycle. That's at least what he's broken it down into. Hal says there's a 4th-stage cycle. The 4th turning is the cleansing, the change. Dalio says there's a 6-stage cycle, and we're at late stage 5 right now, right? His is all based off debt, the debt of nations, the printing of money. And so, make a long story short, I've been hearing these things that Tucker's talking about, that you're talking about, from other folks as well. And essentially, it all comes down to what you just said a moment ago, is that we're in this part in the cycle where things are going to get hard, and that there's going to be a lot of disruption and challenges that we have to work through in order to have that the next spring, right? To the cleansing of the systems. So I will say this: my nickname with a lot of my friends, which I'm trying to shake this nickname because a lot of it's based off of some old ways of thinking, is Doomsday Darius, right? I'm always worried about the worst thing happening. Now, mind you, my parents lived through the Persian Iranian Revolution. I was 1.5 years old when that happened. My parents fled the country when I was literally like 18 months old. I was there. So maybe some of this shit's, like epigenetically in my body, right?
What epigenetic? You were alive. Epigenetic is cross-generational. Yeah, dude.
Oh.
18 months, you're 18 months old can suffer trauma.
Yeah.
100% that's part of your lived experience. Yeah.
Right. So that trauma definitely been absorbed. And so like I found it kind of find its way. So when I hear this stuff, I tend to like my initial reactions, I kind of lean into it, right? And I'm like, oh fuck, is this gonna happen? And then the other part of me is like, all right, man. And most of the time, it never fucking happens. So I need to like just kind of take the data points and not overwhelm myself with it. So a lot of the stuff you're saying, like, I'll say honestly, makes me a little anxious, because I'm like, fuck, man, like, is that really what we're walking into? Are we walking into this time of disruption? Now I'm going to fast forward, and I want to kind of dive into this idea, and we're going to talk about.
We are walking into a time of disruption. The only real question is how much.
Right.
How does it play out? I mean, like, you can have a time of disruption that's not like on the scale of disruption. Let's say a 1 to 10 scale. It can be like a 2, or it can be, or it can be like an empire ending societal collapse 10. No one knows.
Right.
If you don't think we're walking into a time of disruption, you're really good at ignoring every piece of reality outside of your head, right? The question isn't, are we going into a time of disruption? The question is, how long is it? How much disruption? How does it play out? That's it in my mind.
So I love that you're saying that. So this is what because I had the conversation with my wife, and a lot of it, again, I read. So you put out, you had written an article, and we can maybe talk about where people could find that around this idea of doomer optimism. And I want to talk about doomer optimism. And I've been, following other friends that are talking about this and starting to read, I learned some new acronyms, like shit hits the fan, right? What is that? Like, these the TF, right? SHF, right? Like shit hits the fan, right? And starting to read about times in like Bosnia when they when they lost power for a year, and you start reading like what people did during that time frame. And what I told my wife was this: hey, look, I think we need to start planning for these disruptions, at least somewhat, right? Mm-hmm. And what got me there was last year. So Tucker and I both live in Austin, Texas, where the fucking grid almost like imploded. Like it went as close as it could.
The grid did go down for a while.
Yeah. I mean, but literally they were saying we we're going to be down for a month, right?
And that was alarmist nonsense. The grid did go down. Like in all, we'd roll all kinds of blackouts all around the state.
Right. And so what I told my wife was, I said, hey, look, this is the second time since I moved to Austin 5 years ago in April. I said, this is the second time. I'm 43 years old. I was 42 when when these words came out of my mouth. I said, this is the second time in 2 years that our supply chain for power and food has been disrupted. Yeah. Right.
Right. Are you going to pay attention, or just, oh no, it's just those two? It's so shocking to me how resistant so many people are to the idea that they should take responsibility for their own lives. That's what sovereignty is. Sovereignty doesn't mean like, I guess it means you can go live off in the woods alone and not talk to anyone. That's not what I'm talking about. Like I have neighbors. Like we just started a school 2 minutes away on a different 10 acres of property. Like we're the opposite. A lot of people have this idea that like prepping or that kind of stuff, because the old school idea of prepping was essentially taken off of the idea that there's going to be a nuclear apocalypse, right? Because that was the Cold War anxiety. And in a nuclear apocalypse, like if we had nuclear war with Russia, supply chains aren't going to fracture and slow down. Like the world's just done. The way you understood the world before is totally done. And then there is a massive destruction. And that's like, I don't even know what would happen. Who knows afterwards, right? That's not what I don't think that's going to happen, right? That doesn't make sense. I don't think the likelihood I guess it's possible, but the likelihood of that seems, even now, even with all the shit going on in the Ukraine, I really don't think that that's a high likelihood. I think what we're seeing is an empire collapse, right? And we've seen empires collapse many, many times. We've seen the British Empire collapse, the Mongol Empire collapse, the Roman Empire collapse, multiple Chinese empires collapse. We've seen, go down, shogunates, like we know what it looks like when empires collapse. The American Empire has peaked and is now collapsing. And the question is, how does that play out? Right? And so most of it, man, I didn't realize how much of my reality and responsibility for myself I subcontracted out to other people and to the government. and to
Yes.
all of these sorts of things,
So
right?
get so
And
get so give some examples for listeners that are like, I don't do that. Like, give some examples because I know what you're saying, but I want you to say
okay,
give some examples and if you don't mind, like what was the moment when you're like what was it COVID or was it this
well, I mean, it depends. It wasn't one moment, right?
okay.
Enlightenment very rarely happens. Like I know in movies it's cool to be like, oh, I'm an idiot, and then like a flash of lightning happens. I'm a complete enlightened genius. It doesn't work like that. That would be awesome, but that's not really how it works, right? In January of 2020, right, pre-COVID, I thought I was awake. I understood how the world worked, and I did in a lot of ways. But man, all right. So COVID rolls around, right? And at the very beginning in March, you can look at my Twitter timeline and see the posts. I was like, oh yeah, this seems like we all saw the same videos. The people falling over in the streets in China, which we now know, like, what the fuck is that, right? I bought it hook, line, and sinker, right? And so in March, or especially early March, late February, early March, I was like, oh yeah, lockdowns, whatever. Then by April, I was like, this doesn't make sense. Like none of the reaction made any sense. None of the things that governments or public health authorities were talking about or doing made any sense if the goal was to either manage a pandemic, help people stay healthy, et cetera, right? None of it.
What do you like give some examples?
Oh, well, okay. How about the fact that they brazenly, and unapologetically immediately switch stances on masks, right? Like before COVID, any medical professional could have told you that masks are useless or essentially useless for viruses, right? That for airborne respiratory viruses, they are not effective. Period. Like there's decades of this is not even it wasn't an arguable thing in medicine. It wasn't a debatable point, right? And super early on, right? Like I remember like very early on, like
Yeah.
people like, oh yeah, of course you're not gonna like wear a mask for this. That's nonsense, right? Then weirdly, all of a sudden everything shifted out of nowhere. Like the powers to be, oh yeah, we have to have masks. And it's like, well, this doesn't even make sense. Like nothing about this, man. Well, the funny thing is, early on, before people really even knew what COVID was, when like the San Francisco VC firms were like, don't shake hands, wear masks, because we don't know what this virus is or what this disease is, right? Actually, in that case, masks can make sense, right?
Sure,
Like, because you don't know what the hell this is going on.
Yeah.
And so, but then they were saying, don't wear masks. And then once people figured out, they were saying, the smart people were saying, wear masks. And you remember the media was like, don't wear masks, don't wear masks. They were lying about that because our supply chains were completely fragile. And all PPE was made in like 2 places. And so they couldn't get any supplies. So they were lying to people. Given the knowledge at the time, to not wear masks. Oh, yeah, you shouldn't wear masks. Then we kind of figure out what COVID is a little bit. It's like, oh, okay, this is airborne respiratory virus. We don't need masks for it. Cool. And then they switch out. Yeah, you got to wear masks. Masks, the science said. No, the science doesn't say. That's fucking nonsense. It's such, like, and then it became a whole point of censorship. If someone argued this, then like they were their posts were blocked, they were taken off. I mean, like all the people who like have spoken truth about COVID or have contradicted the mainline narrative about COVID, I should say, because sometimes people are saying shit that's just wrong. Like it turns out hydroxychloroquine doesn't really treat COVID. Like there's actually been a couple countries that have really done actually rigorous data on this. You know, early on, like the mainstream narrative was nothing can treat COVID, because they wanted to rush through a vaccine. And part of the counter narrative was hydroxychloroquine does, right? Because it showed early promise in some areas. Well, now, like if you look at the data, it seems pretty clear that it doesn't actually treat COVID at all. right? That
Right.
is pretty useless, right? Okay, great, no problem. Like I don't give a shit. I'm married to it, but like you couldn't be on social media and argue that looking at the data, which there was a point where there was some data that indicated it might be a plausible treatment, right?
Right.
You couldn't do that. Well, I mean, come on, man. Like look at this. Like this is not the behavior. These are not the actions of people who care about truth or care about health. These are the actions of people who are trying to control others.
So if you back up, right, because I would support what you just said around, because I think we saw this in the 2020 election too, right? So there's been this lead up where, where first of all, we have the way people are consuming information in the last 5 years has changed dramatically from the previous few years, because you have essentially it's happening through social media, unvetted sources. There's a lot of
Yeah.
misinformation. There's a lot of manipulation going around. So the world we live in is this world of
Most of the misinformation is coming from the mainstream media.
right. Yeah.
The vast majority.
Yeah. And you have these different camps that have their own worldviews.
What I would call the corporate media, actually, the vast majority is.
Right. So this is the world we live in. And now we go into COVID times, supply chains start breaking down. And so I guess my question for you was, you're seeing these bits and pieces of information. At what point where you're like, hey, the world's changed and I need to get ready for it? You're like, finally enough of this data came in.
There were a couple, like one of the moment I knew COVID was absolute complete bullshit, right? Like the narrative around COVID was total bullshit. Was in June of 2020 when all the BLM riots started. And all of a sudden, all of these people who'd been saying, all the public health authorities who'd been saying, and quote experts, epidemiologists, right? Which is a bullshit science. It's about as rigorous as economics. All of a sudden switched and said, no, it's okay for 20,000 people to gather together shoulder to shoulder because racism is a bigger public health emergency than COVID. It's like, okay, so you're obviously a lying hypocrite. You are an absolute fucking clown. Like there is you cannot argue one and then the other and then pretend that truth matters or facts matter at all. Like it just say, no, I don't care about truth and facts. I only care about power. So I'm going to argue whatever gets me power. Just be fucking honest about it. Like, okay, great, cool. You're a sociopath who's only concerned about power. Okay, then that's who you are. I get it, right? And so that was and man, listen, I watched that George Floyd video. It was one of the most heartbreaking things I've ever seen in my life.
It's just disgusting.
I totally got why people got upset. I got why people went to the streets, and I get it, right? I 100% get that. Like, it made me ill to watch that fucking sociopath with his knee on the guy's neck. It's like, oh my God, what do you do? Like, as a human, if your heart doesn't break watching that, I don't give a fuck about context. I don't give a shit if George Floyd was on every drug on earth. None of that matters. Dude fucking murdered him in this street out of, it was the worst. And so I got the rage in the air. I get it. And that's not what I'm talking about. People go, shit, man, I'd get in the streets too on that shit. That's fucked up. It's horrible. But the people trying to justify it. Oh no, this is okay. The COVID rules don't apply here. Then you're just a liar. You're just a liar. Just stop it, right? That was where I was like, okay, this whole narrative is bullshit. Totally.
So let me just ask you your thoughts on this, because my stepdad was the chief of diabetic science for Abbott Labs. Right. So he's a real scientist, right? Like the guy had practiced science for 40 years. And so he's a smart guy. He understands scientific, theory and practice and all that stuff and scientific method. And so he and I tend, because I'm a moderate, and you always say, you're a moderate when your Republican friends call you a Democrat, your Democratic friends call you a Trump lover. Right. So I see both sides, and I feel like I'm in the middle. And so, I've challenged him on some of these things you're talking about. And his answer is always like, look, everyone always wants to create a, ulterior motive or story or all these things. He said, but usually the simplest answer is the realist answer, right? Which is, And so using this argument, the argument that why the hell is there hypocritical behavior in the media, which I mean, I think you and I both know why there is, because there always is, right? There's always shit people talking out of both sides of their mouth. But what if the argument there is, and I don't want to get stuck on this because I really want to go to the bigger topic at hand, which is we got a lot of problems that we're dealing with. But like when you say all this, I agree. But if the government had came out and said, hey, you're not allowed to leave your homes, you have to wear masks, we're gonna, like, how do you even control something like that when you have such a big, I mean, there's a worldwide demonstration against this. And so they could have, the government said, hey, you need to wear masks when you're having these demonstrations. I mean, you know, like, how do you even manage something like that? You know what I mean? Like, because that's what the response scientifically should have been, which is, hey, it's unsafe for people to go meet in masks like this, and you need to be wearing masks, or let's say masks don't even work, right? Because if we're saying they don't work, we're saying, look, you can't even meet to demonstrate this because it's a health risk. How would you, I mean, could the argument be that they're like, we can't say that, we're gonna they're gonna overthrow the government if we do this, like we cannot tell people they cannot demonstrate. This is there's so much emotion around this topic. Like, it's like the lesser of the two problems, right? The bigger problem is going to be you're going to have a surge in COVID, or the smaller problem is the surge in COVID. The bigger problems, we actually try to stop people from expressing this because it's so much outrage. I guess could that be a simpler answer, that they're like, fuck it, we'll take the lesser of the two problems? You know what I mean?
Are you asking me if the government was manipulating a different way than the way I said?
Yeah. I'm saying that the government's like, if we try to get in front of this, we're going to be standing. There's too much social pressure for us to say, don't meet in public to demonstrate this outrage.
So either way, they're fucking bald-faced fucking liars.
Oh, I listen. I think
either way, they're bald-faced fucking liars.
Fair enough.
The only question is, really, like, so you're saying, hold on, maybe that they're not as horrible and hypocritical. Maybe they're just power-hungry monsters trying to retain power. Either way, they're bald-faced fucking liars. Right?
And on that note, let's go. I agree with you. Like there's mistrust in the government because the government has been hoarding power and not doing, like, our politicians do not go and try to do what's right for the people in bulk, or else we wouldn't have a lot of problems we have. And, you know, I have a mentor, Rand Stagen, that says, listen, we have level 5 problems and level 3 leaders in this world right now. And until we have a level up in leadership,
level -5 leaders.
Yeah. Well,
no, seriously. I mean,
because the incentive system's broken, right? People, if you want to affect behavior, you got to affect the incentives, and their incentives are misaligned. It's like same as like the stock markets, incentives to run your business for the long term are misaligned with the way we price stocks, right? Because we price them daily and quarterly, but we want long-term effects, right? So we have these incentive systems that are misaligned in our financial systems, in our political systems. To your point, it's creating a ton of stress in the system. And we have this, we're in this part of the cycle, or whatever you want to call it, where there's a lot of stress. And so you've opted to start going out and talking about this and to try to create some change, at least for your own family. How does an average person, how do they take action with this type of, I mean, because we're talking about a lot of negative shit right now. How does an average person take action with this in mind, in your mind?
So this is why I'm going to take a little bit of a circular route to answer your question. It's a great question. What do I do is the question, right? This is why I actually don't really like getting into deep specifics about how the government fucked up or who's doing what. There's two reasons for that. One is because I don't know, right? I have some ideas about what might be going on, but I don't know, right? And so, like, it'd be like if you and I had a discussion about what's going on in Ukraine right now and with Russia. Like, we don't fucking know.
Yeah, your guess is
we don't fucking know at all, man. Like, I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure Putin fully understands everything at play, right? And he's in the middle of it.
Yeah,
he's like one of the prime actors. So we definitely don't know fuck about shit. And so, like, what the hell? Like, what most people do, like, let's just take that as an example, is they repeat the opinion of whatever monkey on their screen told them that they're supposed to have, right? Sure. And so that actually gets to the first thing that someone can do is stop giving your attention to people who hate you and who are trying to manipulate you to serve their needs and not yours, right? That's the first thing, is literally, I don't even have my phone in to hold it up, say, turn this off. Turn it off. Stop, right? That's number one. Number two is decide, because once you do that, there's going to be a big hole in your life. So decide, what are you going to fill that hole with? I decided to fill that hole with complete, total personal responsibility and accountability, both for myself and my family. First myself, then my family, my direct family, like my wife and children, then my community, right? In increasing layers out, meaning like my closest friends, the people who live closest to me, et cetera, right? Because I don't care what your phone tells you. You are not a global citizen. That is bullshit. And you are not a citizen of the world. That is essentially bullshit. That doesn't exist. What you are is a person whose the vast overwhelming majority of your reality is lived with a tiny group of people in a tiny geographic area that has a limited impact. And there's no shame with that. That's not a bad thing, right? But understand that's your actual reality.
So when you say
that just is.
Yeah. So just to repeat what I heard you say, like what I just heard you say is, yes, the idea of globalism is real, but this idea that like we are all affecting each other in this macro way, and that needs to come first, that's the misnomer?
Or is that's one? Yeah, dude. Like, I mean, if you think that if I drop a rock into a pond, right? Yeah, of course, like, or people, it's like, you ask me, what can you do? Right? I'm trying to answer. No, seriously, I'm trying to answer that. The first thing is detach yourself from media sources that have nothing to do with your life. The second thing is understand that the overwhelming majority of your reality is that which you can touch and see and feel directly around you. It is not going on in the fucking Ukraine. That has nothing to do with your reality. Not literally, but essentially, right? Of course, all things on Earth are connected. And obviously, I get that. But not in a way you need to worry about, right? And then the third thing would be understand, okay, if this is my reality, the next question to ask is it the reality I want?
Okay.
Right? Because most of what media is designed to do, and I've only worked in this field for 20 fucking years, and I'm really good at it. What it is designed to do is distract you and fool you and manipulate you into believing things that do not serve you.
Do you believe that that's true in general, or specifically with, like, if I use like Reuters?
That's definitely true with the corporate media. That is the entire point of the corporate media.
Is okay.
That is it. That is the point of the corporate media. That is the entire notion. I mean, this is not like some weird off-center critique. That consumerism, consumerist capitalism. Right? Don't get me. I'm not like some fucking asshole Marxist, but consumerist capitalism. The entire point of that is essentially to tell you that you are not good enough, and that you can buy something to make you good enough. That is the point. That is what it is. That is what essentially all advertising is. You aren't enough, so go do this or buy this or look at this, and you will be.
Okay.
That is what it is. That is a lie. And if you let go of that lie, right, which is not easy, because every single interaction in most people's lives is swimming in the sea of that lie. Right. So it's like a fish in the ocean. It's like trying to explain that the water. Yeah, it exists, but it's this tiny fraction of there's other stuff out there. Like, it can't really even understand that. Right. Just like most people. You go look at like the idiot who had a Black Lives Matter, like the white soccer mom from the suburbs of of DC, who had a Black Lives Matter fucking thing then put on her Biden fucking Kamala one, then put on the her I got vaccinated, I got boosted thing, and now has a Ukrainian flag in her avatar, right? She who thinks she's an independent, she's literally just accepting the opinions that have been assigned to her by the corporate media. That's it. That's like those people aren't thinking.
Did you watch the State of the Union last night?
Man, of course not. So how hilarious would it be for me to be like unplugged from the media? I'm like, oh, of course I watched all this series. What kind of, like, it's almost like if you weren't, I know that's not what you're doing, but like that'd be a great way to fucking call my shit out, wouldn't it? It's like, oh, so you did watch, so you're not that unplugged, are you? I'm like, no, I didn't watch that shit, dude. What's wrong with you?
I put it on for like
that derelict Alzheimer's patient. I'm not. What is he gonna say that has any impact on me?
You know what though? I actually thought it was a really good visual representation of everything we're talking about right now.
I'm sure it was,
and I'll explain. If we're in a country right now. And I'm I want to talk about optimism next from this because I think the movement to what's positive and what we can do to create a better world is where we need to go. But I was watching it for a few minutes. Like I was actually trying to see what time. Like I don't watch the news at all. I never really have. So like everything you're talking about, I'm like I just have, for whatever reason, it's always seemed like bullshit to me. So I just don't pay a lot of attention to it.
Yeah.
And so I was going to see what time it was because I put my son to bed at like 8:30, and it's like 8:24 or something like that. So I said, "Hey, what time is it?" And he didn't know, so we're like flipping through the channels to see if something would show what time it was.
Right.
And I go straight to the State of the Union. So I leave it on for 15 minutes. And two things I noticed. Number one, forget about Biden, Trump, Biden, whatever you want to, whoever the next guy is or girl. They were just doing their thing, but there was I don't know. 48 standing ovations in like 48 minutes. I didn't even leave it on. I was like puking in my mouth because I was like, come on, man. Like it was so many standing ovations. I was just like this is ridiculous. This is when I had my last company, I made a rule during our month-end calls that you could not have that many clapping sessions because I said it's disingenuous and it's actually not sincere. It means that you're just doing it out of like repetition for show, right? So I told my team we only clap when it's meaningful because that way you're showing people you support them. And I saw Kamala Harris and Pelosi standing up with the fake smiles on their faces, clapping fakely for like. And I'm not even like I'm a moderate. I don't care about either side of the fence. So I'm not because I'm like a hardcore hate Biden. I think I even voted for Biden, honestly. And I was hating on that part of it. And then the second thing that I realized was that I saw a moment when the Republicans were sitting there ignoring him, checking, and they show these three guys like looking at their phones while the president of the United States is talking. And I said, even if you don't agree with the president of the United States, that behavior is disrespectful behavior. We're disrespecting our own country, right? And so it was those two acts right there.
I don't even know if I agree with that anymore.
Which I think the fact that you even feel
5 years ago, 5 years ago, I think I definitely would have. I don't think I do anymore.
Yeah, and I don't know, but
let me ask you: did you feel respected over the last 2 years by politicians?
I've felt the same way about our government for a long time, which is I think that it's an inefficient machine that is all about power. And the power tide swayed back and forth. Do I feel? I mean, I've had different feelings about this whole thing than others. I think that this is. I think there's been some power grabbing going on, and I think that this was an event that they didn't know what to do with, and it was mismanaged. That's my general feelings on the topic, but and I know you don't feel that way. But
no, like you could have sold me on mismanagement maybe for the first 8 to 10 months. And because it also depends on what level of government you're talking about.
Yeah,
local and state governments.
No, I think locals managing as best they can.
yeah, they're of course they mismanage everything. Like the people with skill and talent are in business. They're not in government, especially local government. Be serious. Like that's the dregs of the dregs. No, dude. Like you could have sold me on that as a larger idea for a while, but now at this point, no. Mm-mm.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if we really are out of the woods on this. It'll be interesting to see how quickly we turn this thing off and make it not a public health emergency. Or
hello, have you noticed? Like Biden didn't he say? Because I saw on Twitter he said something like, didn't he say like COVID shouldn't be a partisan issue or disagreeing with each other? The motherfucker like 4 months ago was like, this is a disease of the unvaccinated. I hope you all die this winter. I mean, get the fuck out of here, man! Like, stop it with that.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
during
it wasn't even a year ago he was saying that. Like, it was like a few months ago.
Yeah, it's a complicated an issue.
It's not complicated. You just don't want to accept the truth because the truth is hard. If you really accept the truth of what's going on the last couple of years, then what it means is the era of comfort and safety and ease is over.
Yeah, so let's say we're there, right? Which like I said, Doomsday Darius is a nickname I have. So like I'm like when you talk about a lot of this stuff, I'm like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And so you've obviously made a lot of changes in your life to be sovereign, to create to be
as sovereign as possible. I still live in America, dude. I'm not a kook about this. Like, I'm paying my taxes. I don't want fucking the sheriff showing up with guns at my place. Like, so I'm not. Don't be like, oh, he's sovereign. No.
I meant
increasing my sovereignty is a very different thing than being like, I'm not paying taxes to the U.S. government. It's still a gang of men with guns, and they're still going to take your shit if you don't pay your protection money.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean that. What I meant was like, look, you're taking action, which around this, which anyone could talk shit about this stuff. I could have 100 people on the show to talk shit on this, and I can say, what are you doing about it? And their answer is like, nothing. I'm just talking shit.
Post it on Twitter.
Posting shit on Twitter. And so you're not. You're obviously you guys have built a ranch. You guys are trying to
so what action should someone take right away? There's 5 planks you need to look at in your life, right? And then start I would just essentially start looking at each 5. The first one is defense. Can you take care of yourself in a violent situation? Can you defend what is yours, meaning your body, your stuff, your family? If the answer is no, you better start solving that problem right fucking now.
So defense would be self-defense.
Defense is number one. That's self-defense, firearms, where you live, how your house is set up. Like, there's a whole. I'm actually doing a whole thing about this right now because, like, I'm going through the 5 planks. One is on my blog. 1 is defense. 2, I would probably say, is water. Right. So, like, if we're talking about sovereignty. Like, you got to start at the bottom of the. If you think about Maslow's pyramid, start at the bottom. First is defense, security. Second is water. Like, I own my water. I have multiple redundant owned water sources, right? Well, rainwater capture, and I understand. I'm not saying you can't go from 0 to perfect, right? So, like, I didn't. You start with, oh shit, I don't know. Like, the water, I don't know. Okay, great. Well, you can go from there to having a Berkey filter. Right, which is, we have 3 in our house.
Yeah, I got
those
one.
things. Those things can filter. You can seriously piss and vomit in the top, and clean ass water comes out. But they're amazing, right? You can get one of those today. You can put a huge water storage thing where, okay, I've got 100 gallons in my garage or whatever, like water, just a bucket, a barrel. If bad things happen, okay, like, we're gonna be okay for 2 weeks or whatever. Okay, great. Like water. Next, probably I would say food comes after water, right? Like, what are you eating? I mean, there's so much. Like, what do you have stored up in case the grid goes down, right? Like happened in Texas last year. What do you have on site? Where are you getting your food, right? So, like, in Texas, we have our own cows. We also have relationships with ranchers, right? We can buy more cows. We can buy more beef. We have direct relationships, right?
But what if you don't have a ranch? Like storing food, freezing food. Like, I mean, if power goes down, the freezer's
All
not going to
possible.
work.
No, you're right, which is why you want to have backup generators, right? Next is what?
Fuel,
Power. Power,
power.
right?
Okay,
Doesn't have to be fuel, could be power. Solar's not fuel, but it's power.
fair enough.
So like we have we're on one of the reasons we picked this ranch is because we're on one of the secondary, the old school power co-ops in Texas, which are incredibly robust, which is a hydroelectric. And that thing doesn't really go down much. Like if that thing goes down, man, there's way bigger problems. Fuel.
Right.
Meaning like the whole system, like, wires, stuff go down, whatever. But like, we also have backup generators, like propane generators with multi-thousand-gallon tanks buried right beneath them, right? So we got, that's not just days, that's weeks and months of power.
Yeah.
How big? Have solar.
Hey, let me ask a question on the propane, because we started looking at putting a generator for our house, and that was what there was different opportunities. But how big of a propane tank did you guys go with?
We went with 1,000 gallons for the secondary one and 1,500 for the primary.
So 2,500 gallons, and how long does that last for?
It depends on a couple different factors. Winter, blah blah blah. Like how much our backup solar is taking off, whatever. But we're figuring worst case scenario should last at least a month.
Okay,
probably we can stretch 2 months out of it.
Yeah, because they were talking about us hooking up to the natural gas, and I said, well, if the gas goes down, then
the problem with the natural gas system in Texas is that it's run by the power grid. It's not an independent grid.
Right.
So if the grid goes down, you're fucked. What I would do if you're going to stay in Austin, which I think is, I don't think there's anything stupider than being in big cities in the next decade. Like it is one of the dumbest possible things you could do. But if you're going to stay in Austin, like if you're going to be in a big city, Texas is a place to be. And if you're going to be in Austin, I would get one of the multi-fuel generators. So like there's ones that run off natural gas and propane and diesel. I think you can get the 3 ones too.
Okay.
I'd probably do at least a natural gas propane, and you bury a tank beneath it and it's hooked up to natural gas. You're going to be good to go for quite a while. I will tell you, one of the things I'm betting on, if the state of Texas does not have access to hydrocarbons, then the 50,000 rounds of ammo I have is going to be the thing. Because like if Texas doesn't have access to hydrocarbons, meaning like propane, gasoline, diesel, then shit has gone so sideways. Yeah, and it is basically worst case. Now we're at a 9-10 now.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're not talking 2 now. We're talking 10.
Yeah, no, we're talking
So we got energy, we got security,
defense, water, food, energy. The last one is actually the most important. Community.
Yeah, I love that. Why don't you get some thoughts around that? Because I know you guys chose dripping, and there's a lot of families.
Yeah, so when I really started diving deep into preparation, right? I realized most of the stuff out there is garbage and useless. But I started talking to the people who have lived through collapses, who have lived through true chaos, right? The one thing that all of them said, and I talked to multiple people from different things, like Green Berets, guys in the military who cause and these sorts of situations. I talked to people who lived through the Chechen Revolution, the Bosnian Serbian wars. I talked to a bunch of them. The one thing they all say, all of them, is that, dude, if you want to make it, you better have a group. Yeah. Like you bet the dumbass American idea of the lone wolf John Rambo, those motherfuckers are the first to die. Like that, they don't make it. Groups make it. Well coordinated, well supplied, well trained groups who are very aligned make it. And so like that's one of the primary reasons we picked dripping. Like without going into, I live here, so I'm not going to go into super deep detail, but I will tell you that this is going to be one of the best places in almost any 1 to 10 degree of chaos scenario. This is going to be one of the best places in the world to be because of the people here. Not because, listen, man, let's be honest. Texas is a shitty state. like in terms of like physical beauty and resources and like the ease of growing stuff and water. It is not the state to pick. It is truly not.
Well, Oregon's way better.
Oh, dude, you can name 50, not 50. You can name 20 states that are right off the top. Like way, way better in terms of water, in terms of ease of growing stuff, in terms of natural beauty. Oh, no, dude, Texas, there's a reason General Philip Sheridan said if I owned hell and Texas, I'd rent out Texas and live in hell. Like, there's a reason he said that. I'm not gonna say, "Oh, Texas is so beautiful, man." Fuck that. It's a shithole. Just physically, it just is, right? But for politically and just some accidents of whatever, this state is full of hard ass motherfuckers, and I mean hard in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like the group of people around us. And it's so funny, man. You mentioned early, John Ruhlin asked, he's been thinking about moving to Texas. And one of the things I told him, one of the things I said in my Big Doomer Optimism piece that really resonated with a lot of people was there are no more safe places. There are only safe people. And John asked me, how do I find safe people? And I looked at him and I said, John, the way you find them is you become one first. Right. And that's one of the reasons I picked dripping, is because before I went looking for someone to save me, I saved myself. And I got my shit together. And then the people who already had their shit together wanted me around them because they knew I could have their back as well.
Interesting.
Right. Like, let's just pretend for a second that I'm not full of shit and I'm actually a safe person. I kind of have my shit together. Like, I don't want to go like, and let's pretend you're just freaking out and you haven't done anything and you're a clown. Like, I'm not saying you are, but let's pretend I don't want you around me. And there's no offense, man. But
yeah,
like, you become a liability.
I was just gonna say, I'm a liability on the balance sheet, not an asset.
Right.
So
right. But if you like really get your shit together and you like have gathered good resources and you have a couple skills and you got the right mindset, I want you near me, because now together we're both, especially if your skills are a compliment, we're both better off.
So I need to learn how to be a better sharpshooter and to fix.
Not necessarily. No, it depends. Seriously, like almost all skills have a place, you know. And like some old lady who can't even pick up a gun but talks to everybody and is friends with everybody, that's a skill.
Yeah,
you know. Or someone who, you know, my mother-in-law, like she has all kinds of like weird homemaker skills, canning, sewing, which in an abundant, hyper-connected, resource-rich, hyper-efficient world are kind of useless. In a world where supply chains are broken and where it's hard to get things, her skills are valuable.
Super valuable.
Yeah.
I love it, man. I know we're running over, dude. We could go on for hours. Like, this is, I feel like we're just getting started. But man, I really appreciate you coming to share some of this. And I know some folks who are listening to this are like, these guys are talking some crazy shit. And to your point, it's like, hey, look, like at best case scenario, most of this shit doesn't happen. And it's just some disruption. And we, as a country, step up and get through this and we're better off. Worst case scenario, some of it happens and you heard it here first, and you're doing some things to your point to take accountability for yourself.
Well, so here's the way and I wrote this in the piece I wrote. I would do, if let's say that you had a true crystal ball and you could tell me, Tucker, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's going to be a 2. Like, yeah, change and disruption's coming, but it's going to be a 2, right? It's going to be really, really low. I would tell you, and this is a God's honest truth, everything I'm doing now, I would do the same, except a lot of the, I probably tone the defense down stuff about 80%, right? Because I don't need 50,000 rounds of ammo. I'm good with 500, you know, or whatever. And then like, I definitely wouldn't go as crazy on having redundant systems for water or power, right? You know, like I would tone all that down, but the basic core stuff I'm doing, I would do exactly the same.
Yeah.
Because like, whether it's a 2 or an 8 on the chaos scale, right? At the end of this is why I'm optimistic. At the end of this, I am going to be on beautiful land that I work with my family. we're going to get most of our food and sustenance from land that we work. So it'll be of the utmost quality, the utmost health, right? We're going to spend most of our time together and around people we really know and like and share values with. And we're going to have this kind of weird, idyllic existence, right?
Yeah.
So it's like all the core stuff would stay the same. And so I really think things are going to get bad, Darius. I really do. On a scale of 1 to 10, like I really think we're looking for a 5, 6, 7. I think it's going to get bad. But I think as long as we make it out of the bad parts, like I think there's going to be a lot of pockets of very intense violence. I think a lot of people are going to die. Seriously, like I hate to say it. And I don't just mean America, I mean around the world. I think a lot of people not going to make it, man, a lot. But as long as we don't, society itself doesn't, as long as we don't reach that collapse tipping point, I think we come out the other side with the opportunity to have a true golden age where people we have a world of people who have taken responsibility for themselves and their community, who are actually doing positive things for themselves and their community, and people are connected and interacting with what's around them and the things that are important instead of shit posting on Twitter about something around the world that has no impact on them.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's why I'm optimistic, because if we come out of this with a world where everyone is growing vegetables and has a couple chickens and is really integrated in their community and knows all their neighbors and whose kids play with their neighbors, and that sounds kind of awesome. You know, like
yeah, I hope we can
just as an example. I'm not saying everyone has to be rustic, you know, like whatever, because you can have stuff like that in cities. It's not
you
country or not.
You totally urban gardens and people taking care of it
do
themselves.
all that kinds of stuff in cities. Totally. I mean, it's all illegal now. You can't zoning and whatever, but fuck that. That's just rules made up by bureaucrats. You can tell all them to kiss off.
Man, Tucker, I love you, brother, and I appreciate everything that you've just gone over with us, and just it's an education session just every time I hang out with you. So thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. Happy to anytime.
Where can folks who want to learn more about this go to your blog? Can you give some feedback?
TuckerMax.com. So just go to TuckerMax.com.
And are you going to be posting more stuff about this? Or is this the beginning of?
Yeah. So no, it absolutely is, because it's like what I spend all my time. I'm spending all my time building my ranch. Like I'm not prepping for disaster, like hoarding cans of beans. No, I'm building my ranch, right? And building it to be sovereign and resilient. But I'm going to live here whether the world goes to hell or goes to heaven, right? Yeah. So now I'm preparing it if it goes to hell, in worst case. But I'm not. That's not what I'm expecting. I'm expecting that I live here on a day-to-day basis. I don't want to live in a bunker. Right?
Yeah,
so, but I'm actually doing big extensive posts on. You can see that kind of the initial doom or optimism post that blew up and has had truly millions of unique views at this point. It's kind of crazy. I'm doing big posts on each of the 5 things: defense, water, food, power, community. I'm starting with defense. I actually ended up hiring the guy, Clay Martin, who's a former Green Beret, who wrote this book, Concrete Jungle, another one, Prairie Fire, which kind of like details like, listen, guys, if shit goes sideways in America, this is what you need to understand. This is how urban warfare works, because he's been doing it all over the world for 20 years. Wow. Like shit's been sideways all over, in parts of the world for the last 20 years, just not in America.
Right.
And I think a lot of that's coming home to roost. And so I actually hired him as a consultant, and he's really taught me so much, man. It's like kind of amazing. And so he's agreed to do like an extensive podcast with me, and we're going to talk about a bunch of this stuff, and I'm going to share a huge amount of what I learned. And then like water, I got my water expert, I got a couple of different food people, 2 different power people, and then like I'm going to literally bring in the people that I learned from, and then people I hired and the people I work with to talk about what we did, right? Which is not the only option. And then say, hey, listen, here's what other people are doing. Because there's tons of ways to do that. I mean, there's a million ways to feed yourself, like we happen to be able to afford good ranching land. If you can't, though, it doesn't mean you die. There's lots and lots and lots of ways to do it in lots of different places.
Dude, I'm excited to read your stuff. And I've been following this stuff as it's from its infancy with you starting to talk about it. So dude, I'm so look, obviously, hopefully none of this stuff happens, or very little of it happens. But to your point, that a lot of the stuff you're talking about is a better way of living. And I think that just gives us some reflection of how can we take care of ourselves, have self-responsibility. It doesn't matter if the world goes to hell or to heaven. That's something everyone should strive for. And this is, and if you're able to add value to folks in that way, then it's such a valuable way to lead your existence. I appreciate that from you so much, my friend.
Yep. Thank you, man.
Cool, dude. Well, guys, listen, check out the tuckermax.com. Sorry, that's tuckermax.com, his website, where he's posting about all this stuff. And man, Tucker, thank you so much again, my brother. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Bears.
All right, guys, we're going to